The past few episodes I've been churning out content that was almost exclusively for the players. But today that changes. Today I try to give some support to the backbone of your D&D group, the person who does all the work beforehand and is stuck juggling all the idiotic decisions the players make in order to make it a pleasant session for everyone, including themselves. I'm talking about the Dungeon Master. Welcome to the Attic Dungeon. My name is Sam, and whether it's tracking initiatives or keeping your players on track, I'm here to help you with everything. So today I'll be talking about some things that you need to keep in mind when you start DMing. Once you start to DM, you suddenly realize there is so much more to the game than going full murder hobo on the nearest slightly suspicious tavern patron. But have no fear, some hopefully proper advice is here. By the way, this advice isn't just for Dungeons and Dragons. Almost any role-playing game can benefit from what I'm about to share with you. Before I delve into it, I'd like to thank the Facebook group Dungeons and Dragons Belgium for providing both problems DMs are faced with and solutions for some of them. I think it's their fault that this topic is going to have to be covered in more than one episode. They provided a lot for me to think, write and talk about. I can only advise both players and DMs to look for a local community to take part in. It's a fresh bunch of people to discuss the game with, maybe even play. And now let's get this show on the road. Before I jump into the larger sections of today's episode, I quickly want to point something out, and that is your position as a Dungeon Master within the team that is your party. And yes, I use the word team. You and your players form a team. Dungeons and Dragons is, normally speaking, not an us versus them game. You're trying to make an enjoyable story all together. You're just filling out a different job than the players are. This means that usually when you're unsure of something or you make a mistake, don't sweat it. Things are going to be all right. Your players are there to help you out and support you, just like you will be supporting them and helping them out. It's important to keep this in mind. You're not alone. It always lessens the stress that any new DM is faced with when they start. Now then, let's start at the beginning. Run a session 0. This term is pretty well known by now, but maybe you don't really know how to handle it or how to run it. So generally it is the very first session that you run before you even actually start the story. In this session, you will present and possibly discuss a few things. I'll highlight a few important topics. Some details about the campaign and the setting. You are the Dungeon Master. You have selected the story that is going to be played. Whether it's a D&D adventure or a homebrew campaign you designed yourself, you should provide the players with some info about the type of campaign and where it's taking place, especially if this brings any restrictions to the table. Maybe in your world there are no more elves because all of them died 250 years ago. Who knows? The description should also include what the balance is going to be between exploration, RP and combat, just to be on the level with your players about what you will be presenting versus what they are expecting. Maybe you'll notice you'll have to adjust some things here and there, or it might prevent the players from starting the campaign with the wrong ideas in their head. It's also a nice way to make sure that the murder hobos know that they actually have to roleplay their character as well. Some players will want to use this information during their character creation, and in general it's also a good opportunity to generate some positive hype about your story. The party! Have the players talk about what they would like to play. It is very easy to balance a party in D&D 5th edition. There is no need for a party to check all the traditional tank, DPS, healer, controller boxes. Almost any party can be a balanced party, but a lot of parties will end up looking like the traditional party setup because people are used to it. That's okay, but it doesn't hurt to explain to your players that it isn't needed and they can all pretty much play what they want. To illustrate, I'll briefly describe how my current party that I play in handles healing. We don't have a dedicated healer. We don't. but 2 characters have some healing spells and a third one has the inspiring leader feat, so he frequently hands out temporary hit points to help out. And it's the same for the other roles that we have. Every character contributes to more than one role, and that way we can all play what we want and we're still ticking all those boxes in one way or another without having a dedicated tank, DPS, healer. Be sure to help out new players during character creation. You don't have to know the details of every class, but being able to describe them all in 2 sentences can really help new people with choosing what they want to play. A bit of specific advice. If a player wants to play a ranger, offer them some insight on the types of creatures and landscapes that the party might encounter, or more specifically, not encounter. Being a ranger with mountains as a favored terrain is really cool, but not when the entire campaign takes place in the Great Salt Flats of Lur. Being aware of what type of party is being formed also allows you to prepare encounters that fit them. Depending on class and archetype choices, a specific type of enemy might be harder or easier for some characters to handle. Imagine you have a bear totem barbarian and he's been shining in a few battles, really being able to soak damage thanks to his bear totem, and then suddenly he's faced with psychic enemies. He's going to be a lot less useful in this battle, and it's a nice opportunity for other characters in the party to shine and show what they got. Rules. Be clear about what is going to be allowed and how strict you are going to adhere to them. Are you going to use any homebrew features or not? Maybe the players have questions about what is possible and what is not, or maybe just general questions about the rules or characters or whatever, interactions between certain features. It always helps if you can clear out those things before you start running the campaign. Frequency of playing. Be clear with your players how often and for how long you will play each time. This makes life easier for everyone to plan in the sessions. And most importantly, make sure everyone is at ease. Role-playing and playing in general is so much more enjoyable when everyone feels welcome and supported. Not just by you, but by the other players as well. New players might feel a bit uneasy at first, intimidated by all the rules and technical terms. So if you have some more experienced players in the group, have them help the newbies. Or if all players are new, take it one step at a time. It's Dungeons and Dragons. No one should be in a hurry. Now, I mentioned rules earlier. Let's have a look at how to handle those during play. Obviously, as the Dungeon Master, you need to have a decent grasp of the basic rules. You don't need to know every specific rule for every situation, but all the basics on moving, attacking, saving throws, and anything specific you include in an encounter should be either here in your head or next to you on a piece of paper. But what when a player asks you a question during play and you don't have an answer? Don't start flipping through every book ever to find an answer. There are 2 very simple solutions. The first option is to ask if another player at the table knows the answer. Even though you're the Dungeon Master, you're still part of the same team, as I pointed out earlier. If you have a player at the table who is well versed in the rules, don't hesitate to use their knowledge. Usually these are players who spend a lot of time flipping through the books and whatnot, and it's another way to make a player shine during a session if you can use their knowledge to advance the game. They will like this a lot. The other option is to make a quick ruling based on your gut feeling for this situation and then look up the rule at a later point. This way you won't slow down the session. Mind you, if the rule question is something related to a player character, you could ask the specific player to look up the rule in between sessions or during a break or whatever. You're already responsible for running an entire world, all the inhabitants. I'm sure those 4 or 5 player characters can handle their own rulings for a change. Yes, you're there to coach them, but if after 20 sessions your rogue keeps forgetting to add sneak attack damage, it is well within your right to point it out and tell them that they need to prepare a bit better. As I've said before, a Dungeon Master is not the only person who should be doing prep work for a session. A player should just quickly glance over their character sheet to refresh their mechanics or check which resources they still have available, or to make sure that they know how their new mechanics are working after they leveled up. It's a trivial matter to do, and it will benefit the session greatly. Speaking of preparation, let's be clear about this beforehand. Don't over-prepare. And that is easily said, and you will learn how fast your party usually advances in a standard session, and you will learn to plan accordingly. Plan what you think they will be doing and a little further than that, in case that they find some clever way to shorten a certain encounter. And by plan, I mean you need to know where your story is heading and which information is essential for your players to receive. Preparing doesn't mean that you need to plan every NPC inside and outside. Know where the party is going, what they're normally going to do, and who they are going to meet for sure. Of course, if you know that combat will happen, you will need to prepare those combat encounters somewhat. The reason why planning out every interaction in the game is futile is because when you prepare option A, B and C for your players, they will usually go for option G, and a lot of your prep work will have been for naught. You will need to be flexible to allow players to challenge their and your creativity. When players are, for example, visiting a small village, what I tend to do is prepare a few short lists of specific buildings that tend to pop up in villages or towns a lot. A few inns, a few blacksmiths, a few stores, what have you. If my players walk into one of those settlements and they're looking for one of those specific buildings, I will quickly pick one from the list that I have next to me. And I will give it to them, and they can visit it and do whatever they want there and whatever they need. If they, however, visit a village without visiting a blacksmith, I can just keep those for the next town that they'll be visiting. It saves yourself a lot of work instead of trying to prepare and come up with a new interesting blacksmith NPC for every village on the map ever. As far as NPCs go, it usually works to give an NPC 2 or 3 characteristics to have them fulfill their goal, if they're not a major part of the story. If you have a recurring character or a minor NPC becomes a recurring character, you can work him out as you continue the story. So in short, know what you're doing, know what is happening, and have a few notes you can fall back on. But don't burden yourself with a preparation time that is equal to your session time. It is unneeded and makes the game a bit of a drag for you, to be honest. Our next topic is something that I've noticed a lot of people have questions about. It has to do with railroading, sandboxing, and getting a party back on track. A quick explanation for the new guys. Railroading and sandboxing are two styles of running a story. Railroading means you keep a firm grasp on the tale being told, and you kind of lead your party to wherever they have to be. It usually involves a story that sends you from A to B, from B to C, to achieve your goals with little sidetracking, maybe best compared to playing quests in a video game RPG. Sandboxing is when the dungeon masters give the players a lot of freedom of where they want to go, how they want to do it. If they want to go to point C before they head to point B, fine, go right ahead, but it might not always work out, or it might, who knows? It's those guys who run all the side quests before even looking at the main quest. Both styles have their advantages and disadvantages. Railroading allows you to keep track of the story more easily, and it's easier to prepare as well, especially for newer DMs. I'm not going to claim that nothing creative and unexpected happens while railroading, but the party usually stays within a certain limit. If you're running a sandbox style, most players will greatly enjoy the freedom that they are given, but the advancing of your story might actually slow down quite a lot. As per usual, I believe that the best style of running your story lies somewhere in the middle. I think there is nothing wrong with railroading here and there. If the party is on the verge of making an important discovery and you can see they're going to get sidetracked by something silly, it's perfectly okay to toss out some really strong breadcrumbs in order to get them back on the right track. After all, your story has to advance at some point. Other areas more naturally allow your players to sandbox. Towns and cities being the easiest location to imagine for a nice sandbox. They are also good areas for new DMs to learn how to improvise things in a safe environment. Usually, or at least at the beginning, nothing major is happening while visiting a town. So it's a nice place to let your players decide what they want to do, how they want to do it, and for you to improvise on some NPCs, some locations, and gain more experience to do it later on in the campaign as well. I think the major danger lies in doing one of these two too much. If you're always railroading, your players might feel more like NPCs being guided around in your story rather than players discovering and being excited about a new world. You are creating an exciting and vibrant world for them. Allow them to explore it. Sandboxing too much, on the other hand, has the risk of not being involved with the story or some subsequent sessions not feeling like they mattered because nothing relevant happened. People want to feel part of an epic narrative. Make sure they are. The best way to balance this, as with everything I talk about, is by running games. Feel the vibe of your group and the sessions. Have they been dungeoneering for quite a bit, following leads from the story? Give them some downtime in a city and allow them to decide where to go and what to do. Do your players seem lost in your world? Provide some strong leads for them to follow until they are aware of what they're supposed to do again. Now, no matter which style you're using at any given point, your party is perfectly capable of getting themselves off track. And while I was gathering info for this episode, quite a few people asked me how to get a party back on track if they manage to get out of the story completely. Luckily, there are a few easy solutions to get them back where you need them to be, and usually it just means shifting your preparation around a little bit. Maybe you can do something as simple as just moving an NPC to a different location. If a person that you need them to meet has a valid reason to be somewhere else where the party is heading to, just move him. If the character has no reason, give him one or quickly insert another NPC that either refers him to the first one or needs to meet this character as well. Maybe their little sidetrack could turn into a nice escort mini quest with some new encounters, some new exploration, and a nice reward at the end. It may happen that a character does something that is going to lead to an entire session that is spent on that particular issue instead of the main story. That is more than okay as long as it doesn't happen every week and it is able to involve the entire party. I once had to run a jailbreak session because the party's rogue got arrested. It provided a nice break from the storyline and I had a lot of fun designing and running the encounters, and my players had a lot of fun trying to break out their friend from jail while he was trying to break out from jail towards them as well. If your party is planning to split up for a longer period of time, and this is going to be problematic, which it often is, give them some incentive to stick together. Actively warn them that the dangers ahead are going to be too great for just two people. The full party will be needed. If you very actively warn players about stuff like this and they still choose to split up, it's okay to attach some consequences to this. There's a difference, by the way, between consequences and punishment, but I'll come back to that in the sequel episode. So just remind your players that splitting the party is a bit of a hassle for everyone. They won't be playing together that much for a while, they will just be watching each other play. It's less engaging than when everyone is together, and also they should take into account that it takes you a lot more work to prepare two separate storylines. Just be fair about it, they will accept this if they are a good group. As I said, this is going to be a two-parter episode. I realized halfway through typing this one that one episode was going to be way too long for me to handle. So I am going to do a part 2 in a month where I cover stuff like handy tools for Dungeon Master, how to handle larger discussions with your players, RP immersion, and attaching consequences to actions taken by your players. For now, walk away with all the information that I have relayed to you. If you have any questions about being a dungeon master yourself, or you have tips that you want to give to dungeon masters, leave them in the comments. I will address them and probably take them with me into part 2. If you want to find your way back to the attic dungeon very easily for part 2, don't hesitate to subscribe. And then if all goes well, ladies and gentlemen, I will see you again in the attic dungeon.